Ian from Easy Genie, and today I'm going to show you 4 ways to use old county and city maps to help with genealogy. If this video helps, please take a moment to like it and follow me, and let's get started. So I've been using maps for a long time from the US and sometimes from the UK to help to research my ancestry, and I found that these old maps sometimes have genealogy gold located in them. I'm going to show you what I mean. This is a map of St. Lawrence County. It's from 1858, and it's actually a pretty common type that I've seen all over the U.S. and counties and cities all over the place from the 1800s. When you look at these maps and you zoom in, most of the digital maps, they have zoomable features. You'll see that there's actually the names of people on the maps, and these names correspond to the property owners at that time in 1858. So obviously, this is a very important piece of information if you know that your ancestors came from a certain area and you can find them on a map. Not only that, not only can you find out where they lived at that time, and let me just show you an example of this. I'm going to zoom out on this particular map, this 1850 map, and I'm going to find the village of Potsdam. I'm going to zoom in on it, and it's right here. So this is Potsdam in 1858. And let's say that you know that you have some ancestors, for instance, S.B. Gordon or B. Williams, that lived on this road that's going to the east from the city of Potsdam. What you can do is you can open up Potsdam on the map that's on Google Maps or maybe Apple Maps, and then you can use that to see if you can determine if that property is still standing. So right now, this is the 1858 version of the map. It looks like it's a little bit off kilter, maybe to fit the dimensions, but let's say that this eastbound road is the same as this one, Route 118 right now, and you can see there's some roads that are kind of splitting off from 118 to the east of the town. This is Elm Street. And let's see if we can find out what those roads are. So I think actually this road and this road where S.B. Gordon lives, it's the same intersection as this one right here. So if we see that S.B. Gordon lived a little bit to the west of the first road that is pointing off to the north, that's probably right around here. So what I can do is I can zoom in on the map. So I think S.B. Gordon lives right there. And then what I can do is I can use the street view of it. I'm going to drop it right where I think S.B. Gordon lives and see what's there. So I am pointing right now, I want to be pointing to the S.B. Gordon. They live to the south of the road. So if I'm pointing east, they should be located to the, yeah, I am pointing east right now. So that whatever house is over here, maybe S.B. Gordon used to live there. And I can zoom in a little bit. Maybe I can move around a little bit and see if the house exists. Now, that looks like a modern house, but actually I can see that across the street, a little bit down the road, this does look like a period house from the 1800s. So it's possible for you to use one of these old maps to find out exactly where your ancestor lives and either connect it to a current piece of land or a current property, or even the house if it's still standing. So that's one use. The other thing that I found out with these old maps is that oftentimes they also list commercial properties as well as commercial features. So for instance, right now I can see that the railroad is right here. It says there's an academy right here, so that's probably a school or something like that. I've also noticed on these old maps there's frequently illustrations that can be found on the side of the map. So let's take a look, for instance, at this one right here. This commercial building, Eagle Block, Ogdensburg. So this is in 1858. The building was probably new at that time. And not only is it cool to see this old building, which still may be standing in Ogdensburg, you'll notice on the lower floor, they're the names of businesses. And at that time, many businesses had the surname of the founder, just as they do now with some types of businesses. So H.S. Humphrey, T.B. James, Charles Ashley, T.W. Young, J.C. Sprague, etc. So these are, if you have an ancestor that, for instance, owned a business either right in town or maybe something outside of town, like the Smith Iron Works, or sometimes there's certain processing plants or some sort of farm venture that has a name associated with it. You can actually find an illustration of the building that they worked in, or find it on the map, which may also give you clues to where people may have lived or how far away it was. One thing you should understand, back then in the 1850s and even up until 1900 or 1910, people didn't have cars, so people had to live pretty close to where they worked. So that's use number 2, finding commercial properties and the owners of small businesses as well as other commercial ventures. Number 3 is a really useful tool if you want to go beyond information that's contained, let's say, in a census. So censuses often are focused on an entire county. But what I've found is that especially if they lived in a small town, you may not be able to determine exactly where that person lived, or maybe you know that they came from a certain county, but you don't know where in the county. And I've seen this when I've talked with some friends who are from the South. They'll say, "Oh yeah, my family's from Yadkins County, North Carolina," and that's a starting point, but it doesn't tell you the details that you may need to know for where exactly they lived. What municipality they lived in. And let me give you a little example right here. So we have this particular part of the map, and you can see to the south, it's the town of Canton, and to the north, it's the town of Lisbon. And if you zoom in, you can see that there's this little town of Morley. It's a village, actually. It's within the town. It's within the village boundaries of Canton. So if you know that an ancestor came from Morley, in their mind, they come from Morley. Like that's their origin place. But actually, there's a difference between, for instance, William McAllister, who lives in the Canton portion of Morley, versus J.W. Belden, who lives in the Lisbon portion of Morley. And these old maps, if they show the property locations, you can actually determine where they lived on that property. So once you have that information, so let's say that your ancestor was J.W. Belden, you can go to the Lisbon town offices and you can search for instance, vital records. You can search for property deeds. You can also go to the local courthouse if you're looking for how this property changed ownership over a period of time, and you'll know that this property is actually located on the village grounds of Lisbon. And one thing you can also do is you can clarify it with a modern map, and you can actually find the exact street address if that's helpful. So you can see Morley is right over here, so you can zoom in and find out exactly where that is. So that's the third use, using town borders to really narrow down where your ancestor lived. And finally, the fourth use that I love about these old maps is oftentimes you'll see that people have similar names if they're located near, if they're from the same area, or if you're looking at a street. And I'll show you what I mean right here. So I don't know if you can see that, but here it looks like it says I. Morton, and then right across the street is M. Morton. Or if you go further down the street, you can see a Churchill located here, and another Churchill here, J. Churchill here. And on and on and on. This is very common for markers to have the same surname in a certain geographic area. Now, sometimes that means that the owner is actually the same person. Like, for instance, Churchill here, it doesn't have the first initial here, so you can't tell if it's a different person. But for the Mortons, you can. So this is an I and this is an M. So clearly that's a different person. That's a clue that it may be a family member. Actually, very likely that is a family member, especially if it's an uncommon surname. And then you can use that for further research. Because let's say that your ancestor is I. Morton, and you don't know who the parents' names are because you can't find any records. Well, if that's a brick wall for I. Morton, what about for M. Morton? If you look into M. Morton's records, maybe you can find out information about who the parents were or other details, either through some vital record that you turn up or a church record, or something like a will or a deed or some other document that tells more details about M. Morton that you can't get because they just don't exist anymore for I. Morton. So that's another way to use these old maps. Now, one thing I want to say about maps like this, it's not guaranteed that your ancestor can be found on maps like this. So one thing I've noticed, actually, let's zoom back in again. If you look at some of these old maps, I've noticed that while the rural areas are pretty well covered, once you get into the city, the houses are just marked with a dot, but there's no name next to it. So you'll have to actually find a municipal level map or a town map in order to determine your ancestor if they lived in that town. I've also noticed that they do. I found them all over the United States. These county maps or these municipal maps that have markers of property owners on them, but it's not everywhere in the United States. And also in other countries, there's no guarantee that it's like that either. I have seen it in some British maps, but not all British maps. Like old maps from the 1700s and 1800s, they actually marked off property owners, so you can use it in a similar way, but it's not a guaranteed thing. One thing I also want to say is, besides these county and town level maps that you can find, I've also found insurance maps that sometimes have information at the city level, not only about who owned what property, but what the property looked like, at least a diagram of what it looked like. So even if you don't have a picture, you might have a diagram of it. And this is especially true of people who own businesses that might be in the town center. There's actually like a map of the building. You can see kind of like where the entrance was and what was next door and other details like that. So maps are a lot of fun. I love to look at them. Sometimes you can see them in person. For instance, libraries often have old maps like this, or museums, historical societies. But online, I found lots of resources like that, including the Library of Congress website. And there's other sites that are free, completely free to use, where you can look at old maps like this. My name is Ian Lamont. I am the founder of EasyGenie, Genealogy Charts and Forms. If you go to easygenie.org and click on blog, I have lots more videos and blog posts that are basically tips about how to discover information about your ancestors. And I hope you like it, and I hope you can like this video as well. Thank you so much for watching.